Hello everyone, welcome back to part 4 of our paper mache gargoyle tutorial. In this segment we're going to start laying on some clay, and also in the previous segment I created what can either be some ears to attach, or this could be an additional set of horns. I haven't really decided yet or where exactly I'm going to insert them. But I'll do that in this tutorial, or this segment of the tutorial. In the last 3 segments of this tutorial, we concentrated on building our armature, creating the armature in separate elements, and then putting it all together, strip machining it, and then we also did a little bit of pre-sculpting as well. So in this segment, it's all about laying on the clay, getting us set up so that we could continue in on our sculpting and get it all detailed out. The other thing that we're going to concentrate on in this segment is also creating teeth or fangs for our gargoyle, some talons or toenails, and then also the eyes, the eyeballs for him as well. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, before I start laying on any clay at all, I need to decide where to attach these right here. I think instead of making them ears and putting them down here, which would be fine, I think instead of doing that, I'm going to attach them up here as like maybe separate horns up here. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. I do have my hot glue gun. It's getting fired up, but I'm just going to take my marker, and I just want to figure out where I want to insert these. Alright, I'm going to tilt this forward so you can see where my marks are. Here are my marks. These are going to be the guides. That's where I'm going to cut in to the sculpture in order to insert those additional horns. Alright, so what I ended up doing is I made, I'll just remove these real quick to show you. I ended up making 2 slits, kind of like X's, to insert. I initially made a slit going this way and another slit going this way, but when I inserted what's going to be my additional horns, it didn't look right to me, so I ended up putting another slit in the opposite direction and inserting them that way, and that's how I got that look and the positioning on where I want it. Right, here's a different angle or different look at how I position them. So kind of almost directly behind these other horns, but just a little bit off-centered. Turn it this way. I think that's going to look pretty cool. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to remove them, and I'm going to squirt some hot glue right inside those openings that I created, and then I'm going to insert my my horns once again. And then for good measure, while they're in there, I'm going to go ahead and squirt some more hot glue right around the edges here where I inserted these. If you're going to be inserting additional horns or a set of ears or whatnot, something to keep in mind is that because we have a lot of layers of not only strip mache on our sculptures, but in addition to that, all of the cardboard that's underneath the strip mache. So you're going to have to work at it a little bit to get that cut in there just right, in order to insert any additional horns or other features that you may want to put on there. But that's pretty much how that looks. And I'm going to go ahead and wait and allow that to cool before I carry on. Alright, now that I have attached my 2 additional horns, they're cool and set with that hot glue. Before I continue on, I just wanted to, I forgot to mention that off camera I did put a thin layer of clay on the bottom of my base here. Very, very thin, like 1/8 of an inch. And I allowed that to dry. So just to get that out of the way, so I don't have to worry about that. That's the first thing that I clayed over. What I suggest is before you move on and claying, putting any kind of layers of clay or sculpting, get that bottom, get the bottom of your base clayed over. Let it dry. If you put it in front of a fan, it's not going to take that long to dry. Probably 24 hours I would give it in front of a fan. And then you'll be ready to move on with the rest of it. So I did forget to mention that earlier before I started this tutorial. But just wanted to let you know that. So what I'm going to do now is, and what I always like to do with something of this scale, is I like to put a thin layer of clay, again, just like the bottom of the base, about 1/8 of an inch or so. It doesn't have to be very heavy or thick. And I'm going to cover the entire sculpture. I'm going to leave the base last, because when you get to a certain point, you're going to need something to hold on to. And so that's why I always leave the base last. And I do this without doing any kind of sculpting in or building up any details first. I want to have that thin layer of clay on there, and then I let it dry for about 24 hours. It's probably good enough. It might be a little wet still after 24 hours, but it'll be dry enough to be able to manipulate and turn the sculpture and apply more details with the clay. Okay, for the remainder of this segment of the tutorial, you're really only going to need a few things. I have some paste mixed up, and this is just my basic recipe. It's nothing but flour and water mixed to a thin pancake-like consistency. And I have 2 paint brushes here of different sizes. This is a chip brush that I'm going to use, and then this is a basic just artist brush. And I'm going to use this to smooth over the clay after I put the clay onto my gargoyle. And in that note, I have a fresh batch of paper mache clay made up. This is probably more than what I'm going to need, but I'd rather have more than not enough. One of the first things that I like to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start layering on, again, a thin layer of clay over the entire sculpture. And I'm going to begin with the wings, and then I'm going to work my way to the back. So I'm going to start on the inside of the wings. After I complete that, I'm going to start on the back, and I'll do the back of the wings, and then I'll come in and I'll do the back of the gargoyle from here all the way down to the base. Then I'll move over to the sides and continue on layering on that clay, smoothing it in with my paste. And then when I've done, completed that, very last thing that I will do is the base. And I'm probably going to leave these edges so that I have something to hold on to without putting my hands on the clay once I get to layering on the top of the base here. So here I go. Again, this is going to be pretty simple. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay on the clay, and I'll film probably most of it, but I'll fast forward it or do it in like a fast frames for you so that you can see what I'm doing, but without it being so long and drawn out. So I just want to give you a basic example here. I do one section at a time. I'm layering on the clay. I'm going to go in with my paste, my chip brush, and I'm just smoothing that in. Smoothing over that clay, making it as smooth as I can possibly get. And after I've gotten that all smoothed in as best I can with the paste and my brush here, I have these, my fallback sculpting tools. It's a plastic spoon, and you can always go in and you can see that that even makes it even smoother. So after applying the paste over your clay and smoothing it out with the paintbrush, you can also go in with the back of a plastic spoon and smooth it in even more. Okay, so I wanted to show you, I got to a point where I did not continue, or I decided not to continue layering on that thin layer of clay over the entire sculpture for a couple of different reasons. First of all, on the wings, once I got the inside of the wings clayed over, when I went to start on the back of this wing right here, it became kind of wobbly, and I didn't like that, so I decided to stop and let it dry. And I did let this dry for approximately 24 hours. So now it's not wobbly at all. It's very sturdy, and I can continue on layering on that thin layer of clay over the back side of my wings. I did get to a point where I put in the thin layer of clay on the entire back of the sculpture from where these horns are up here. I did layer on that thin layer of clay from the top of the head here on the back of the sculpture all the way down to the base. And I layered on that thin layer of clay on the sides and the front of the legs here. I didn't put any clay on the head or in this what will be the chest area. I'm not overly concerned about putting a thin layer of clay on these areas because they are really solid. And it's going to get to a point where I'm going to need to build up more clay for the mouth area, and I'm going to put some clay inside these eye sockets. And the clay does need to be wet, because in this segment coming up here, I'm going to show you how to create your eyes, and we're going to create those eyes and let them dry completely. And we're also going to create the fangs or the teeth and what will be the toenails or the talons. So we need to create those, let them dry for at least 24 hours. That'll be plenty enough time for them to be completely dry so that we can insert them into our wet clay. I'm going to carry on and show you how to create, using your paper mache clay, your eyeballs, the fangs, and the talons. I glued them together so you can see there's two different pieces of corrugated cardboard that I glued together on this separate piece of cardboard. I drew in the tooth, and then I cut through all of the layers of the cardboard. That's going to give me a good thickness. So if I could show you it that way. Hopefully you could see that. That's going to make that tooth thick enough instead of just being a very thin tooth or fang. And on this side, I flipped it over and I even have a mold for a smaller tooth. And this is very, very simple. And these are very, very basic tooth shapes to begin with. So you're going to take a piece of plastic. So this is a piece of plastic grocery bag. You put it over your push mold here. Take some of your clay. And you're basically going to just push your clay. Fill that tooth mold there. Push your clay in there as far as you can get it. I'm going to do both. If you push it all the way down in there, and then just pop it right out, and you have that tooth. And then basically all you have to do is remove some of the clay around it. So that is by far, in my opinion, the easiest way to get, a set of teeth that are going to be uniform in size and in the thickness of them as well. You will have to kind of reshape them a little bit. That's not a big deal. So there's one tooth, and I'm just sitting it on a piece of plastic. When you go to get ready to create them all and have them dry, you don't want to put them on a piece of cardboard. You don't want to put them on a piece of wood. You want to have them on a piece of plastic because if you do, then they will stick to cardboard and you won't be able, it'll just adhere to it and you won't be able to remove it. So always put them on a piece of plastic while they're drying. Now once you have all of your teeth or your fangs made, if you want them to curve, if you want a curvature to them, it's very simple. I'm using, this is just a tube of acrylic paint, and I'm just kind of shaping it and kind of curving it over onto that plastic bottle so that when it dries, when these teeth dry, it will have a little bit of a curvature to them. And you could do that as well with all of your toenails or your talons. As far as the eyeballs are concerned, pretty simple. If you're using your paper mache clay, if you're going to create 2 eyeballs, you want to make sure that you have the same amount of clay for both of your eyeballs so that they are symmetrical. So by creating them both at the same time, grab the same amount of clay and simply roll them into a ball. And it's completely up to you on how big you want your eyeballs. If you want them to be smaller, then make them smaller. If you want them to fit in there, and have them bigger, I kind of like this size for mine, then you're going to go ahead and make them bigger. Use more clay and make them bigger. Now before this clay dries, if you wanted to create any kind of marking in the eye, do so by using like a toothpick. If you wanted to create like a pupil or anything like that, use your toothpick, and of course you're going to want to do that while the clay is wet before it starts drying. So this right here is good for me. I'm just going to go ahead and remove them, and I'm going to let them dry. I'm going to create a lot more talons and fangs, probably a lot more than I'll probably need, just in case. I'd rather have more than not enough when I go to insert them in the wet clay. So that is the reason why we're creating these separately, and I am not putting in any clay onto the head or the face, because these areas in here, the clay does need to be wet in order for me to put in my dry paper mache eyeballs, and then the clay around the mouth, and when we create the the feet and the toes, that clay needs to be wet so that we can sink in our teeth and our talons into that wet clay. All right, a couple of things that I'm going to continue working on off camera is I'm going to layer on that thin amount of clay on the backs of my wings. And then I'm also going to layer on a thin amount of clay on these horns that I attached at the top of the head. Just because that was a thin, flexible cardboard and it just had the layer, a couple layers of strip mache over that. So I do want to put a thin layer of clay over those so that they can be very, very hard and sturdy when I go into sculpting the details of that. The other thing that I'll do off camera is I'm going to put a thin layer of clay on the top of my platform here. And then that's going to be it. Come back next segment and then we'll sculpt out the rest of it. A couple of other things that I wanted to point out is that on some of my larger, what are going to be my larger fangs or teeth, I did want to put a slight curvature in them, so I have them propped up on this plastic paint bottle. If you want your teeth to have more of a pronounced curvature, then you're going to want something smaller in diameter, such as like a marker or a piece of another piece of plastic, a round piece of plastic that's smaller in diameter than this. The smaller of diameter, the more of a curvature you're going to achieve by doing that. The rest of them, including my what will be my eyeballs, I have just sitting out on a piece of plastic. All of this is going to go in front of a fan to dry. It shouldn't take longer than probably 12 hours for that to dry. But we're pretty much in the home stretch here, so that's going to be a wrap on this segment, on beginning laying on the clay and forming our eyes, our talons, our toenails, or our teeth, and our fangs. So in the next segment, we're going to come back and begin sculpting in all of the details in the face. We're going to be inserting our eyeballs, our teeth, and creating our feet and our toes, and inserting our dry toenails into that wet clay. So that's going to be coming up very quickly. In the meantime, as always, I thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.